3, 2, 1, go. I'm going to use a plane. I'm just going to get rid of the sphere, and we're going to start with a plane. And I'm just going to make it bigger. And I'm just going to stretch out the back a little bit. Okay, so now we have our plane. And I want to be in orthographic. And then we can just validate it. And then we're good to go. So we'll just use select mask. And we'll use the rectangle. And then we'll just kind of do it about halfway. Something like that. And then go to your gizmo. And you have to bring the pivot down because we're going to bend it, but we want to bend it at this line. Tap pivot. Bring it down to the line. Let's hit the top view so we can see. So we'll bring it down to that line. Tap pivot again. That sets it in place. And now I'm just going to turn it a little bit so we can kind of see what we're doing. And I'm just going to bend it like this. Maybe a little bit more. Like that. We'll take this, go back to the select mask. And then we'll just make the mask a little bit bigger. There we go. And then just do the same thing. Go to gizmo, pivot, and bring the pivot down to that line. Tap pivot again. And then we're just going to bend it a little bit more. Like this. You know, you might have to move it up a little bit. Because you kind of want it to be a curve. So you want it to be like a nice curve. So just be careful not to like stretch it too much. And if you do, just kind of like move it up a little bit so that it's a little bit better of a curve, like that. Let's move it up a little bit more. There we go. So now we'll go to gizmo. We'll move the pivot to that line. And actually the pivot should be kind of hard to see, but we want the pivot like actually on the you know, the point where we want to turn it. So that looks pretty good. So now let's just continue to turn it up again. But I don't want that little like divot there. So I'm just going to kind of move it up. I can probably do a little bit more. Something like that. We'll just go to our select mask and then hit clear because then we can see it. And the next thing I want to do is you want to use your rounded edge brush. Check out video, I don't remember what the video is. But go check out this video on how to make this tool. It just kind of smooths everything out evenly. Pretty much the same thing as if you were to take symmetry, take all of the symmetries, take smooth, make smooth really big, and then just kind of like smooth everything out. It's sort of like that, just cleaner. So if you don't have it, you can just do that with the smooth, but I would recommend going and checking out the video so you'll have the rounded edge brush. So take your rounded edge brush and start from the middle and then just drag out. And you can see it kind of like changes. You can see the edges sort of move every time I do that. And I'm just smoothing everything out on the mesh. So I'm just kind of smoothing out our curve there. So that's pretty much all I'm doing. And you can do it manually with smooth. You just have to be careful because when you use smooth, you know, if it's not equal or sometimes if you do it too hard, it can sort of like make it a little wonky and a little funny. So that's the only reason I use the rounded edge brush. Normally I set this to like a gray and like roughness I set up. I don't want it too glossy. So I really like something like that. Now that we have this, I like to just set the camera to perspective. So this will change things too. Let's put it on like, let's put it on like 15. 15 is good. So that's essentially we have our backdrop. If you wanted to bring it in, you know, that's kind of what it would look like. So this is just a good base. Let's bring the size down because like if we're going to save this and use it over and over again, we don't want it to be really big. So that's another reason why we use the rounded edge because that will help us when we decimate. So now we just want to bring the poly count down. So we're here and decimate. And we just want to try to get it down at least below 1,000. 196 I think is fine. Do I see a crease there? We'll do 385. I saw a little crease. So I think that's pretty good. That's a good backdrop. So if you just want a backdrop, then you're good to go. You can just take this, go down to the Nomad file and export it, and then just save it as a regular backdrop. But one thing that's really cool is it'll save like the lights and everything. So let's add a sphere. And so we see how big this sphere is when we bring it in. And I think that's pretty important, because when I start sculpting, like I usually don't make them too much bigger or too much smaller. But to me, this tells me that that this is too small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this bigger, as though the sphere is the subject. So I'm going to make it really big, something like that. And now I'm going to bring it down to the very bottom of the sphere. So like if I was making a character or something, it would be the very, his feet would be on the backdrop. So we kind of want something like this. This is just like a good little like test. And essentially, if we wanted to, we know this is center because we just brought it in. So this is a good time, like if you want to just do something like this, make it really big. And then you can save the view. So we'll go to camera, add view, and we'll just do 1. And just so like if we get turned around and we want to just quickly go back to it, that way we can just quickly go back to the view. So we might want to do a few things differently. You can stretch it out. It might be nicer if you want the backdrop to be further back. You can just tap on it. You can stretch it this way. You can stretch it this way. You can obviously stretch it sideways. So all these things are really, really useful. Let's move it back some so that the backdrop is a little further away so that our sphere is kind of in the middle. So we are in a good place now. And we can just put up some lights. That way, if you make a character, if you make a chair, or make whatever you want to do, and you just want to present it, you can just bring it into this file. And we'll use this sphere as like our stand-in, essentially. So the first thing we want to do is go into the lights and turn off environment. Everything should be black because there are no lights. But we will add a light. Lighting is one of my favorite things to do. I'm going to try to keep this pretty simple lighting. So let's add the first one, and I like to call this W1, like world 1, like a world light, or like the sun. So W1. You know what? I should start calling it key. I think this is supposed to be like the key light. I think that's correct. As you can see, I'm kind of a dum-dum, but I usually like to bring this up a little bit, make it a little bit brighter. So for now, we'll just do like 1.4. And I think it's looking pretty good. We haven't done the material on the sphere yet. We'll just leave it how it is for now. One other thing that affects how you make your sculpts or how they look is the environment. So really quickly, if we go into, where is it? There we go. So if you go into the shading window, remember we turned the environment off, but when you turn it on, these really make a difference in how everything looks. So you have to just keep that in mind, because sometimes you might not turn the environment off, and this is why you turn it off, because if it's on, it makes a big difference with everything. So that's why I like to light without it and then add it at the end. This is my own environment. The link's in the description. This is the one I use pretty much for everything, but still, now I'm going to turn this off. All right, so we have our key light. That's our main light, and I'm leaving this shadow pretty hard, like a hard shadow. Sometimes I make the other shadows soft, but I want this to be the one main shadow. So that's our key light. So, and later on we might change this light, but for now I think it's pretty good. So let's add an edge light, and this light is actually going to be light up just the very edge over here. It's going to have a bright like pop of light. It's going to look really nice against the black. So let's add another light. We'll change this light to a spotlight. And now I'm just going to do the top view. Essentially, I just want to move it back here, over. I just wanted to hit our, sometimes this thing takes a while to get there. There we go. So I wanted to hit the back from like an angle. So something like this. So now when we go back to our regular view, we can kind of see this edge, but we can make it a little more edgy. There we go. So when we bring it down, you know, we can make it a little more edgy like this. If you don't want it on the ground, you can just kind of put it low and then tilt the light up. So we're still getting a nice edge on it. Let's check our view. And I think that looks really good. It would be nice to make this a little bit higher. I think that's good. I just made it a tad bit higher, and you can update your view by just going here. So I think this looks pretty great. The only thing I want to change is I don't really want this really hard shadow here. So I'm going to go into this light, and for the shadow, I'm just going to hit softness. That way that shadow is kind of soft and blurred, because I only want this one really hard shadow. All right, so the next light, I kind of want something down on the backdrop. If you ever like really studied like really good 3D or 3D characters or little cute 3D scenes that have a backdrop like this, kind of like Lucas the spider. If you ever look at, I think his name is Lucas, cute little spider 3D, but you'll see his little opening scenes. He's against the backdrop, and it's really, really cool. It's just simple, but he's against the backdrop. And those are the kind of things I look at and I'm like, how do they do the lighting? Sorry, I know I'm talking too much. I get too excited about lighting. So let's add another light. Wait, did I add it? What did I just do? Oh, I don't know what that little thing, there we go. So let's add another light. Let's call this one, the one that we had just made, the spotlight. Let's rename that edge light. So we know what that light is. Now the new light, let's name this BG, I think is fine because it's going to be on the background or the backdrop. Let's make this a spotlight as well for now. So for this new spotlight, we want to bring it close to the back of the backdrop, and we want to kind of point it straight down. We're going to soften it, but I'll leave it hard so you can like see where the light is pointing. So essentially, I want it behind our hero. We'll call the sphere our hero because that's the only subject in the scene. But we just want it right behind him. I just want it pointing down. So that's all I was pretty much doing. But now I'm going to bring this a little bit higher. And see this orange? That kind of makes it bigger and smaller. That's the same thing as this cone angle. So I'll make the cone angle a little bit bigger, make it a little softer, and lower the intensity. We don't need it that bright. We can also bring it a little bit further away to also lessen that intensity. But I kind of want it on the back wall, but not really touching the sphere. It's kind of its own thing. So I think something like that is pretty good. We have that nice blend around him, and you can obviously change it and make it, you know, wider or less wide as you please. And yeah, all these other ones I don't really use much. I think this is like hardness and softness. Let's make it as soft as it can go. That's a little blue sphere. All right, so the last light, actually, is this the last light? Yeah. So we have one more light, and this is a very dark shadow here. So I just want to add another light. We'll add a spotlight here to kind of lighten that up. So that'll give us a little bit of control over how dark this shadow is. So let's add another light, and let's just call this, I don't know, spot. I can't remember if I had names picked out for these, but we'll just call it a regular spotlight for now. So let's let's change it. First of all, let's change it to spotlight. And let's just aim it so it takes out that shadow. That's actually pretty good. And it gives us that really big shadow at the back. So let's change that first. So we're going into the options here, and then we're just going down to shadow and just make it really soft. We can make it extra soft. Okay, and now let's bring the intensity down on that light. Because we really just want it to control that shadow. You know what I mean? So, you know, if we didn't have this light here, the shadow is really dark. But putting another light is sort of like adding like ambient light. And we can make it even a little lower. We do like the shadow. We just don't want it pitch black. So I think something like that is pretty good. You just kind of find a good medium for your light. All right, so the next thing that comes into play is we can add the environment back. So we can add the environment back. Obviously, it's going to change it a lot. But what I like to do is just bring it really low, and then just add it a little bit until you can just see that it makes a difference, like that. So yeah, lighting is quite complicated, but it's very, very useful, and it's very fun once you kind of get it and once you kind of understand it. So the next thing I want to do is, what is the next thing I want to do? We can add some fun, I don't know, let me think about it for a second. So one thing I did notice is that you can see this light here, and it's kind of like bugging me because it sort of doesn't really look like it makes sense. So that is the edge light. And I just want to sort of tweak it a little bit to get it off the ground a little bit better. So I just used the orange. I just used the orange cone angle to make the cone a little bit smaller. And I just kind of got it off the ground because when it was on the ground, it makes that weird. I don't really like that because it cuts into this nice shadow, and that's the shadow that I want to keep. So you do have to kind of look out for things like that. And obviously, whatever you're lighting, you'll have to adjust these lights anyway. But just remember that any light that hits the ground is going to make a difference. So just look out for things like that. You know what I mean? Because that looks funny. All right. So I think this is actually pretty good. The next thing we want to do is look at it through post-process. So when you render, that's what things are going to look like. Of course, I max out everything on mine. So post-process, let's turn it on, and let's turn up the render resolution. So this is like a better idea of what your thing is going to look like. Let's go to our view. And now everything is going to run a little bit slower. Let's see if we have, so depth of field is on. So that'll make the background a little bit more blurry and beautiful. Of course, you can adjust that here. These you can kind of adjust, but you might want to adjust it when you have something other than a sphere, because this is kind of basic. So it's looking pretty good. The only thing is it's kind of like blending into the background. So you might want to you can lower the lights a little bit. So for example, the key is the main light. So we can try lowering that a little bit to give it a more like dramatic feel. So you can do that, or you can just lower the color of the background. And if you want to get the color, if maybe you change it or something, you can just use the eyedropper like that. So once you have the color, you can just kind of drop it a little bit. You can make it a little darker, and that might make it a little more dramatic. And the other thing that you can do to make it a little more dramatic is you can change the key light to a spotlight. Because right now the world light that we have, the key light, it's kind of lighting everything. So if you want to make it a little bit more dramatic, you can change this to a spotlight, because it's more narrowed, and the light isn't really affecting everything. So then you just have to kind of find let's turn the render resolution down so I can actually work a little bit faster. So then you just have to kind of put it in the same spot. We had our key coming down from the top. So yeah, we kind of had our key, something like that. The shadow looks about the same. And of course, we just want to lower the intensity of it. Maybe something like that. And then this is where you could do this and make it even more of kind of spotlight on it. You know, like if you're watching like a play or something. So you can do something like that. Let's bring the intensity down a little bit more, even still. So then you could have something like that with a nice backdrop. Let's take a look at our view. I think it looks nice. Okay, and let's do something. There's also, you can change the colors of these lights too, and that will make a big difference. Like for example, the edge light, if I was to make this like a pink color, you know, that kind of changes things too, and just kind of makes things a little bit more interesting. It's actually very bright, so I'm going to lower that down a little bit. That edge light. And that glare is super glary. So sometimes you just have to move it and adjust it so it's not so super glary. So, you know, you can play around with it until you get it exactly how you like it. For now, I'm just going to set this back to white. Also, another thing that affects this glare is the material of the sphere. So let's say we want to keep it white, but we want to change the roughness of it. That will also affect it. You know, that gets rid of, I think that looks way more beautiful. Did we not validate this sphere? I guess I didn't validate it. There we go. So now the best part about this is you can save these settings, and that way when you have other things, you can bring them in. The only thing is it's very dark now, so one thing to just change that is I'm just going to up the exposure, because that kind of makes everything a little bit lighter. So if I bring that up, then it's going to make the scene a little bit lighter. And remember, you can also take the color of the background and you can raise that up a little bit too, so it's not so dramatic. You know, something like this. Let's go to our view, and we're at our view. Okay, so the very last thing I want to show you is why this is so cool, why I think it's so cool. Because so right now we have all our lights here, and we have our view, we have our main view. So we can take everything, and it might bring them all automatically, I don't know, but I like to take everything. And I actually like to do this. It's probably not necessary, but yeah, it actually probably isn't necessary. But I just like an easy way to just select everything. And let's call this one fresh backdrop. So that's our fresh backdrop. And now we can go here to Nomad. And we can export, save to files, and this one will be fresh backdrop, and we'll put it in assets, and we can save it. So now we have this saved, and what's really great about that is, let's say let's get rid of our sphere, and we want to bring something else in. Mikey is obviously huge, as you can see, so let's shrink him, but I like where his legs are. The fact that we put the backdrop at the bottom of the sphere, that helps us a lot for this, you know, because his feet are already lined up. So let's change the pivot. So let's tap front, and let's change the pivot down to his feet, his feeties. And it might help if we go to orthographic, because then we can put it right on this line. Actually, see, I made this other thing. So I'm going to put it at the bottom of, that. And then I'm going to tap pivot again. So even though we're not seeing this piece, I actually made this, let me bring everything up. I made this cool thing. So I'm going to put that at the very base of our our plane. Okay, so now obviously he's way too big for this backdrop, so we can go ahead and let me change the render resolution. Oh, it is down. Okay. So now we can scale this down, and I moved the pivot so he will stay at the surface. So let's move in. Let's check out, let's see what it looks like with our view. It's actually not bad with our view. Maybe we can even make him a little bit, let's make him smaller. Yeah, let's keep him small. Maybe something like this. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now you can sort of see why you'd have to adjust some of the lights. This one actually looked good. Most of them look good. This is a little too bright. So let's firstly figure out which light it is. I think it's the edge. Yep, it's the edge light. So you can either move it a little bit, you can adjust it, or you can just lower the intensity if you kind of like where it's hitting. And I like it because it's hitting here and here. But let's add some color to it, kind of make it a little more interesting. So we'll do something like that. And I also want to change his material to subsurface because I love subsurface. This is obviously too much. So we'll bring that down to something like this. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. And let's change the backdrop. Let's change the color to just like some sort of different color. Let's do something like that. We'll make it a little darker. So maybe we'll do something like that. And then you can adjust the, like maybe we want a cool light for the key light. So this would be warm, but we want cool. So we can kind of see how that looks. Whoops. And maybe we want to bring the key light up a little bit. We can make it a little more intense. Like that. I think that looks pretty good. But let's bring our render resolution up. And then we'll bring him to the middle. And I think he looks pretty good. So you can change the views, obviously, and check them out. Maybe he should be a little bit smaller. So you get more light. So you can adjust the lights or you can adjust the character. But I think that looks pretty good. So, you know, it's really easy to bring in other things, bring in other sculpts. And that way, if you don't really want to spend the time to make a new backdrop and make new lights and stuff like that, you can just quickly bring in your character. Let's bring in another character real quick. Okay, so now we have this crazy guy. Let's bring him up. I'm not sure why the pivot is all messed up, but that's okay. We'll live. I'm going to bring it to the ground. Let's make him smaller. So now those lights are hitting him nicely. So he has a pretty nice backdrop and he's pretty well lit. And then again, you would just adjust the colors to whatever you want. If you want a gray, maybe he does better in gray. Maybe like a warm gray. Get a little bit of an edge on him. Oh, I know what's going on. His subsurface is way too crazy. Let's bring that down, baby. And yeah, like when I put them together, I should have like done it so that he's a little more cohesive. But as you can see, I have to like go in and manually adjust. But anyway, that's just a quick way to light. Hopefully you guys learned something from that. I think key light. Here's white. It's a little bright. So maybe I'll just take this down. Smidge. And you can also adjust that backlight too. Oh, that's the wrong light, I think. I think this was supposed to be for our little shadow, so I will move that. Where's the other light? Oh, it's all the way up here. So yeah, you also have this kind of freedom to make that smaller and bigger. And then you have a nice little scene. So of course, when I save it, it doesn't work. I opened it up and it didn't work. Like, it just had the backdrop. It didn't have any of this stuff. So now I have to figure out what exactly, because it worked when I did the sample, but then it didn't work when I was recording the tutorial. So I'm confused. So again, I'm going to, let's lower the render resolution so I can work a little faster. So I'm going to bring all of these in. So this is the sphere and everything. I'm just bringing everything in and I'm highlighting everything. Okay, only include selected objects 2. So why is there only 2? I feel like there should be more, right? There should be more. I guess it's only the backdrop and the sphere. Okay, so, oh, actually, maybe I don't want to check that.
You won!
Maybe I don't want to check it. Export Nomad. So let's call this one backdrop 2. We'll save it in assets. So this is backdrop 2. So we'll just save this so that we can come back to it easily. So now let's delete everything and then let's add to scene, assets. So this is what happened with fresh backdrop. It's just the backdrop. Not what we're looking for. So I'll delete. Now let's try the new one. Assets, backdrop, open. There we go. But why in the world would this not be? Oh, maybe I saved it the wrong way. But anyway, so you don't check. So don't check this. Leave that alone. And then it will bring everything in. Did I really save that as sideways in the other one? Where is it? I really saved it as sideways like a dum-dum. But here's another cool thing you can do. You can take everything and then you can, I'm going to do 90 degrees. I'm going to turn everything 90 degrees. Can I move origin? Put everything in the center. Okay, and if I want to check that that's the center, let's add another sphere. Let's add a cone. Oh, interesting. So it's not the middle. Interesting. Interesting. Oh, yeah, sometimes things are just always extremely difficult for no reason. I don't know, at some point in time I must have moved this. Is this in the middle? So let's do this. So we move the sphere to the middle. And now let's take everything else, not the sphere, and not the cone. And then we can, let's remove the sphere from the group. And let's remove the cone from the group. And now we'll take everything else and move it up. Let's just do orthographic. And we can move it up till it's right on the edge. And so that's still the middle, so we're still a little bit off. So I'm going to grab everything, and I have to still bring it to, whoops, come on, sphere, help me out. So now I have to bring everything to where it's supposed to be, which is right about here, I think. I'm such a dum-dum. Okay, so now we have our middle. Everything else looks pretty good. I can get rid of the cone, although I kind of like the cone. So Fox will remesh them together. Watch it crash. It'll be just my luck. Okay, so now that's in the middle. Let's check out our view. Probably shouldn't work. Oh, how does our view still work? Oh, you know what? Because we moved our view as well. So that's why our view still works, although it's a little off. Because I want it to be in the center of this. That way I know it's like in the center of the project. So let's update this. Okay, so now we actually should be perfect. So let's just replace that. So I'm going to go back here, and then I'm going to do save. I'm not going to check this. Export Nomad. Save the files. Assets. We're going to call this backdrop 2. We'll just replace it. And now let's do a dumb check. So we'll delete and then add to scene, assets, backdrop 2, and then we're good. Let's see if we add a cylinder, it's in the middle. We're good. I'm good. I'm out of here. All right, so this has gone on long enough. Let me know what you guys think. I'm sure there's more efficient ways to do things, but that's how I do them for now until I learn new ways, and then I will teach you all new ways. Keep drawing, keep sculpting. I will see you all in the next video. Also, be sure to check out my latest and greatest Skillshare class, making a miniature diorama. That's really, really cool. I say really, really a lot. But make sure to go check out my latest Skillshare class where you can make this. And that's up on Skillshare. Just go to my website, drugfreedave.com, for more info. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. If you want to learn more, check out my classes on Skillshare. I have 2D classes and 3D classes. Be sure to check me out on social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all Drug Free Dave. As always, keep drawing, keep sculpting, and I'll see you all in the next video. What's up guys, Drug Free Dave here, and welcome to my newest class on Skillshare. We're gonna make a 3D isometric diorama in Nomad Sculpt. So I've always wanted to make one, so I decided to try to make one in Nomad Sculpt, and I think it came out amazingly. So the first thing I wanted to do was teach a class so I can show you guys everything I know. One thing about these scenes is they feel really complicated and they feel really advanced, but it's really just small individual things broken down. So when you're taking this class, don't think about it as a class to get to the ending. Think about this class as a lot of tiny tutorials all put together, and you come up with something amazing at the end. Each class is developing something or making a new item. We're going to learn how to decimate and really make our models low poly. And when you're doing a scene like this, all of your models, all of your sculpts have to be very small because it's a lot in one space. It's actually really fun and really easy once you sort of get your formula going and you can figure out how to sculpt, but also how to make things efficient and optimized for our scene. So of course, by now, you know me, you know my teaching style, very relaxed. There's no stress involved. As long as you have some patience and you're willing to sit with me and you really want to make some beautiful 3D models and 3D sculpts, you're in the right place. All that being said, let's move on to the next video, the class project.